Last week, there's an interview that got many people talking about, and that is the one with Governor Sonko on Jeff Koinange Live. And just to put a disclaimer here, this is not to attack the person of Jeff Koinange. I respect his work. We all do, in fact, and it is all peer review. We'll also be reviewing work that I have done or anyone else in the profession in terms of quote-unquote the big interviews. And this was on Wednesday, and it got a big reaction because, first of all, it was a bit dramatic. There was a walkout halfway through, actually abruptly, before it actually got to its conclusion. And many felt it wasn't best handled as it should have by a journalist. But we'll see, and you can see for yourself online, and this is just a snippet of that interview.
You're not.
So don't provoke me.
No. Governor, hold on.
Okay,
let me ask you this.
We are on Passaris.
No, forget Passaris.
I'll not leave you to control this
Hold
show.
on.
You will never do it yourself. You are dealing with Sonko.
I know.
Not Deputy President.
Governor Munyewe.
Yes.
But let me ask you this, Governor.
Yes.
You mentioned Dandora a moment ago.
I'm not allowed you to go to Dandora. Let's go back to Passaris. Let's go back to the system. No.
Bros.
No, my friend.
We'll go to Passaris in a moment.
Okay, let's deal with this
I
system.
Like your development record.
No, that one is the end. Towards the end.
No. Wacha tuongee
achieve-
hivi, tutarudi huko, Governor.
This is a very sensitive issue.
I know it's sensitive.
And women are watching.
But Passaris is not
I've been
here.
portrayed as a bad leader to
You're
women.
not a bad leader.
So,
You're not a bad leader. That's why we want to talk about.
And there's a long version that you can follow online. Let's get some quick reactions to this, and it's an entry point to the conversation on how these big interviews are managed or handled locally, because there has been a lot of discussion in media circles, WhatsApp groups and others, that something needs to be done. Mashari, any surprises as to how this went down?
When you have Governor Sonko as your guest, you can expect anything. The thing is, Jeff is a showman, okay? We seek to inform, educate, entertain. His show is about entertainment. He keeps a fire extinguisher there because he wants to light fires. That's what he does. That's the way he does it. Whether he's hosting Sonko, he loves having Miguna, and he loves people who will cause a controversy. But as you can see, I think somewhere along the way, citizens decided that we can't risk this. For me, it's not just about the code of ethics. It is about their own reputational risk and allowing somebody on the set who you know is going to defame somebody, and you will be held liable.
Yes.
So I would assume that royal media have their own editorial policies, just like Nation should have, or Standard and any other group. And they saw that this is a borderline case. There is going to be a defamation suit, and we don't want to be held liable. So cut it there.
Anything wrong with being, a showman, as he puts it? Because
no, absolutely not.
There's audience for that.
Mark, there's nothing wrong with being a showbiz man on the news. However, your objective for conducting any interview must be very clear. It must either be to inform, to teach, perhaps to entertain, which is probably what Jeff does. But is that really all? When you decide this is the guest we are going to invite, you already can tell what to expect.
Yes.
Because you know the nature of the person. We expect, as a good show host, an interview has a set of questions. And we try to we actually expect you to have control of the interview. So when you're shooting the questions, expect any answer. Expect your standard answer that you actually anticipate, but then expect the opposite. Expect the person to actually stand up and walk away from you. Expect the person to actually hurl out insults. And so you need to be extra alert every time you bring a controversial subject to interview. But here's the other bit. As soon as you realize that you're losing control, you need to let it go. I actually have a lot of respect for the producer who decided we're going to end this talk show.
Yes.
We're going to end this interview. But I would have expected Jeff to be actually alert as soon as he realized that he was losing control of the interview, to actually terminate it himself, to do the sign off himself, to say we are not able to continue with this, and actually give a justification for why. The audience ought not to be treated to stuff like that.
Right.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Because it is an investment of their time. They expect to learn and gain something out of it. They expect to be able to make decisions. Please remember, Governor Mike Mbuvi is a governor of this county. Therefore, we ought to actually see what he's made of, but not to the extreme where it becomes an insult to me as a listener. Mm-hmm. So for me, I expected Jeff to respond much earlier, which he didn't. I can see him making an effort. To the point of even moving down, it's like almost he wanted to hold him there and stop him or cover his mouth and say, hold on, stop talking about that. This is what I want to talk about. But he realized that before he even moved, he didn't take the quick action.
Right.
Where he waited for his producer.
Yeah. But I think different interviewers have different styles.
Yes.
And there was an Indian interviewer I used to really enjoy watching on TV. And this guy will say, you know, I'm going to ask you a question. And you better answer this question accurately. And if you don't intend to answer this question accurately, you might as well just don't even bother. Because we know you like evading questions that I'm asking. So, Mr. Prime, I'm going to ask you now. And you answer me. Okay? Okay? He's not asked this question so far. Okay? And it is really
the showman,
entertainment. Okay? And then you have this other talk show where you go, for example, at the BBC Hard Talk.
Yes.
And the person who is doing the hard talk really wants to create the impression that I'm really in charge and I'm really hard. To the point where sometimes it feels almost condescending and patronizing on the guest who is there. You ask somebody a question, and before he's gotten time to answer, you know, you've drilled him with more questions and so on. So yes, you're showing that you're a tough interviewer, but are you getting the desired outcome? I think every interviewer should be respectful but firm. You want to get something out of this interview. In the local scene, there is one journalist that I like how he does his interviews, and that is Linus Kaikai, my former classmate in college.
I was hoping you'd say me, but it's okay.
You are coming a distant second, but you're very promising.
I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
So there's the issue of being entertaining and engaging, but at the same time drawing out something that you want to get. And of course, this one for Jeff, you know, I think he has his style. And I think when he started JKL, he did it very deliberately and said, we are going to have a bench and we are going to sit outside and I am going to come up with words like smoking, you know, and things like that. You know,
and people look forward to it.
People look forward to it, and some people want to see how, you know, he's going to ask some union leader whether he's still capable of, you know, entertaining a young wife. In some of these things, you know, maybe that's what he really enjoys. But eventually, when they decided to terminate the show, and you know, they came up with
they have a policy.
They came up with an opaque thing called due to editorial considerations, which is fine. Yeah. But at least I expected later for them to explain what are these editorial considerations that led to the cancellation of that show. But if you leave it at editorial considerations, then you begin to wonder, was it editorial considerations?
They call it quality control.
You know, my view of that entire interview is this. It should never have happened, because this, the governor was coming off of a public spat with the woman rep for Nairobi. Something had actually happened where the governor had, for lack of better terms, it was gender-based violence, because it was an assault that was gender-based against the woman rep for Nairobi.
Okay.
Coming off of that, for K24 to its citizen, sorry, my apologies, for citizen to determine that the person to give a platform to speak is the governor and not the underdog, the person who was humiliated and embarrassed, the person who was denied a voice. That is the person, that is not the person that you're considering. You're bringing this bully person to give him a complete platform to now perpetuate and continue to execute his harassment of the woman rep. I thought that was
would it have been
judgment.
any better to have both of them have an opportunity, just like he had done previously on KTN back in the day?
I think if really they were trying to follow this particular story, they would have started with the person who had been harassed. They should have started with Passaris then bring back the governor, because the governor had gone on to enforce
something.
No, no,
or not even have, or wait for the issue to end, but to bring the governor.
But it's topical right now.
It was topical, fine, but to bring the governor.
I don't think we can
bring the
dictate
governor.
who comes on the show and in what order.
It's like bringing a rapist to giving a platform. No, it's the same thing.
The comparisons are really...
It's very extreme, but it's the same
we are
thing.
talking about harassment.
The thing is
It is
there's a harassment.
The governor, let me explain it.
There's
Let me
gender
explain it.
violence.
I mean,
Let me
justify
explain
that
it. Let me
term.
justify
I mean,
it. The
rapist
governor,
is-
let me tell you. So, Esther Passaris is a woman leader in Nairobi. She is elected by Nairobians, and she has a position. She's an MP. When she stood to question the governor's use of monies and how he is throwing around money, it's not clear where it's coming from, she was speaking to her mandate as a person who is supposed to hold the governor accountable. When the governor stood to speak, he did not address the woman rep on that mandate and that question. Instead, he chose to address her as a woman, telling her, I don't need to pick your calls because you are not my wife.
I'm
and
not
on that
sanitizing,
basis,
but before that
harassment
statement, there was
and
actually,
notice
he
when
did
the
talk
when the
about the
woman rep
project.
had to walk out, remember the crowd actually started chanting, toka hapa mama wewe, at kwenda huko. Do you understand? Now, to give the platform, for citizens to choose to give the platform again to the governor to continue with this harassment, I thought was bad judgment. They should not have had the governor, and if they needed to follow up on this topical issue, they should have either done an analysis or, like you're suggesting, had maybe both of them on the platform.
On a fair principle
Yes.
of fairness, perhaps you'd have had both of them. But again, you must always go back and ask the timing of this interview. We could have postponed it to probably another time, when both can be present, if they would both
Yes,
agree to be
because she was
present,
away in Canada.
so that everybody gets their right or opportunity to speak. But then again, every time you have a guest on a show, you as the interviewer must think the interviewee has come here with an agenda. And that's exactly where the governor had the better advantage, because he came in with an agenda of certain anger which had come from a totally different incident. And so him being here gave him yet another platform to actually continue with what had started at a different function. Those who had not watched the function where he had that incident with Passaris,
Yes,
and
on
where she
Mother Academy.
actually walked away, those who had not seen it now had opportunity to actually start saying, and what happened? And why is it that he's talking like this? So for me, it probably was, as Lydia says, poor judgment, but we must always be very alert to the agenda of the guest that you have brought. You bring me to the show, you tell me this is what you want us to talk about. I create my own agenda because, look, this is an opportunity you're giving me to talk to people.
Right.
So that is something that needs to really be taken care of.
Like
and
we-
as a
I'd
responsible
like to-
show host, you really must take care of your audience.
Like I said earlier, Jeff is a showman. The aim of his show is not to inform or educate, it is to entertain. In terms of
At what cost?
topicality,
Exactly.
At whose
in terms of
expense?
topicality, Sonko was the most ideal topical guest at that
that time.
particular time. That the show went helter-skelter is all part of the show, because that is what Jeff thrives in. That is why when Miguna was in Nairobi, off.
And
You remember he used to be at KTN
Yes.
when something went
The
wrong
bench,
over some
Yes.
objectionable things Miguna said, and they decided enough is enough. They cancelled the show despite its very high ratings. I would think and I presume that when he went to Royal Media, they set some guidelines on what can be said
And that
or
is
not
why they
said
ended
on
the
his
show,
and that is why when this one went offline, they just had to cut.
you know,
But
as you
again,
say,
we
yeah.
must
As you
also think.
respond, if there's nothing wrong with what is being done, I'd like maybe the people on this panel to explain then the idea to not do harm, because already this governor had done something then he has come and continued to orchestrate it. Should showmanship really be pursued at all costs? And shouldn't there be some sort of line where when you start doing harm to certain people? Isn't there such a responsibility?
First of all, I was present when the first altercation began.
Madaraka Day.
Yes, Madaraka.
I saw you looking very embarrassed at the back there.
And Macharia is pretending to be able to read my facial expressions. But you know, it began with a conversation where somebody said, why did you go and give out relief food in Turkana? Where did you get the money? And you know, people, you know, are beginning to say, what does that have to do with anything? Okay? Then she said, oh, and you know, you help these groups and give them money, and there are these issues, maybe it's corruption money and something like that, okay? So now, I think, reading the mind of the governor, I think he felt obligated to respond, okay? And that's why he was asking, if I give food in Turkana, whose problem is it? People are dying and nobody's going to question that I have taken food. Whose problem is it? And then the issue of corruption came up. And you know, I think the justification was, if you don't respond when an accusation is made, it could be believed. I remember when Uhuru appeared at the ICC, and there was this talk that he had met with the leaders of Mungiki and so on, and he denied it. But the question that he was asked there is, when that allegation was made, what did you do?
Yes.
That one question that he did not take action about is probably what even just ended up being the ICC case, had he done something. So now when the governor went to Jeff's show, you can't blame him, because the first question Jeff asked is, what about Passaris? If he didn't feel it was necessary to go that direction, or that you would then be giving him an opportunity to continue, why did he begin with that question? But the moment that he asked, then he was steamrolled and he couldn't control his show anymore, you know?
Then you want to actually think, who is your audience?
Okay.
This is a show which is running during time when family is watching. And so, the children are looking at this and they're seeing what the leaders do. They're seeing also what the journalists do. And they're beginning to think, oh, so this is how we normalize bad manners. The media should not be used as a platform to actually normalize bad manners.
It can also
to
be
normalize insults and so on. Because, look, I know Macharia is saying that this is not the place to trade.
To expose
but
the idiocy of our leaders.
Perhaps, but is
Because
our audience at that level?
It plays
a
out
lot of people who voted for Sonko now must be thinking, was I in my right mind to vote for this guy?
But he has also a team that is cheering him on. He has a team cheering him on.
There's actually the grassroots people do not reason that way.
They don't.
Yes, they don't. They say, this is our leader, he's doing this for us, he's fixing our road, he's bringing water, whatever they do out
he's
there.
Given food in Turkana.
He's given food in Turkana. So he continues to enjoy his support. So I think when you get people going to Twitter saying what kind of this, the voters are not the Twitterati, you know?
But you see, Mark, here's the thing, and there's something we need to keep sight on. The sensitivity to this issue of women and looking at things with a gender sensitivity. It behoved Citizen and it behoved Jeff to be sensitive to the circumstances around which they were inviting Sonko to that podium, to that platform.
Sonko alone.
First of all, she was out
they
of town.
should have had that sensitivity, because there was a woman out there who had been humiliated. And we cannot now begin to give platforms to people, and we cannot make it normal that in this country, it is okay to harass women and humiliate them and talk to them the way you want. It is not right.
Maybe we are playing this gender thing.
No, we are not.
Let me tell you.
Exactly.
We're not.
No, we are not.
Even if it was a man, Sonko would have insulted.
Tone him the same way.
But he has had disagreements in Senate with other people, but he has never thrown those level of personal attacks. This is a gentleman, and I hesitate to call him a gentleman, but he was saying.
In the crudest terms, Sonko will insult anybody in public with the crudest terms, man or woman.
And Esther Passaris stood there to make that statement as a politician, not as a woman.
She did
it as a politician. And remember, let me also clarify something. Let me clarify something. Esther Passaris is the woman representative of Nairobi. She's an MP. Yes. Her mandate is not to oversight the governor. Yes. The oversight is done by the MCAs and the Senate. And the senator. Oversight.
She's in parliament.
She should do her job. There's a specific job that is done. She should decide for the woman representative.
She has
the freedom, question, but you cannot say it was oversight.
Also, Mark, she has the freedom as a human being, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, and she has a platform, she's a leader, she can
so
speak.
look at it in terms of a politician.
So, and for me, it's okay. And Sonko should have responded to her. Sonko should have responded to her as a politician, but not as a woman. Because
actually,
he responded to her as a woman,
even we should
not
be
as a
reacting
politician.
on the issue of terms of two politicians fighting and not a man and a woman.
But Sonko already responded to Esther as a woman, telling her that do not complain just because you're complaining because I have not picked your calls. You know, trying to bring that thing of women are fussy, you know, they are nagging, trying to bring that concept of you're only complaining because I didn't pick your calls.
You know,
and because he did that, we shouldn't fall into the same trap. And we also
of,
just
of
look at it in terms of the narrative, man, woman, politician, and so on.
And I think I want to remember something that Charles said at the very beginning. He talked about perceptions. What kind of perception is being created around a woman who is a leader? I do not want to rub in that fact that she's a woman. But here, Gaido is saying that whether it was a man or a woman who had offended Sonko, so to speak,
he would have reacted the same way.
He would have reacted the same
Yes.
way. Granted, I wouldn't still allow Sonko to insult another person like that. Okay? So regardless, I would still want to stand up and actually protect the other person without giving them platform.
Yes.
I think I hear you saying that, oh, she was out of the country. This interview could have waited until she comes back and the both of them actually get equal platform. Perhaps Jeff is going to stand up one day and say, this week, because I can only have one guest on the show, this week I was going to have Sonko and then next week I was going to have Esther.
Yes.
Perhaps that's
Actually,
what he was going to say. But then, that's the point, as Rita, I'm saying, look, looking at the sensitivity of the issue, looking at the timing of it, coming very hot on the heels of Madaraka Day, then it would have been very prudent of him to not host one, but to look for opportunity to actually host both of them.
Okay.
But to host both of them, for what purpose? To what end? So that they could come and trade more insults? We've had enough. Hey, we can go and have our own insult shows out there. We don't need for Sonko to show us any standards by which we must use our insults.
Yeah.
So what is it exactly that Jeff intended to do? Because if he opened the interview by bringing in Passaris' name, so what was really his objective?
And okay,
that's where I have the biggest issue.
All said and done, and I want us to close this issue because it's not about Jeff. It's just a situation that presents itself for any media house. He would have come here. He's come here before. That is Sonko, and people actually said, "Oh, you're sanitizing the governor," based on how the interview.
Perhaps you should probably have had Jeff here.
Yes, and
you know,
well, Jeff, I've asked him before previously, especially when the Passaris and Miguna issue came up, and he didn't want to come. Granted, and I understand that time was very heated, and he has his right to reply and explanation of this. But all said and done, has he broken any ethical code of conduct in any way from Media Council's perspective?
He must have.
First, it is the question of fairness, right of reply. Where does all that fall? And then the responsibility that any journalist who puts content out there, whether it's an interview and whether the interview is for entertainment, whether it is for hardcore news or it is just point of information. Every person who puts content on TV, on radio, on print, has a responsibility to the audience. What is it that you're doing? Is it for public interest? Or are you just putting people out there? Yes, we ought to see what our leaders are made of. But surely, to what degree? To what degree? To the degree where we allow them to insult each other? I mean, I was listening to him talking about Keleweke, Tanga, and I'm saying, first of all, who even coined these names? Was it the media? What did we do? We have had a role to play there to actually begin branding groups of people. I don't know right now as I am speaking which one I belong to. I've actually been asking myself, okay, is there somebody who is in between the Kieleweke and the Tanga? Which one am I? Am I the slow ones? Am I the quick ones? Which one am I?
Yes.
Teletanga, perhaps, something like that. So the media has a role to play there. They owe the audience responsible content.
Okay. And as a former Media Council chairman.
Yes, your question was whether a law was broken. And in my view, I think having a dominant interviewee is not illegal. But if you have an interviewee that you might have problems with, you know, it is not bad to also sit down before and agree on some parameters. okay, and say, look, these are the 5 topics we want to discuss, and these are the questions, and please, each one, let's give it 10 minutes or so. That happens all the time, okay? But if you are not really interested in bringing out any information in the interview in the first place, then when it turns out to be, you know, somebody wants to insist and say, look, I must make my point, then I think maybe it appears like the interviewer himself was probably not prepared, or we just wanted the show to flow in whichever direction.
As much drama as possible.
Like there's no control at all.
Before we take a break, Lydia first and then Macharia.
I might not be able to speak to the legal
side of things.
necessarily, but I think there was an ethical breach on the part of citizen and on the part of the interviewer. They should have been more sensitive to the circumstances around this, and that's the sensitivity that journalists are called to have all the time, constantly present as they engage, because situations will always be evolving, and so that sensitivity was missing, and to that extent there was an ethical breach.
All right, Macharia, really quick.
Okay, in terms of the code of ethics, I would say it was borderline in terms of issues about fairness, about integrity of the interview, and even about being in charge of the content as an editor. Let's say as an editor, being in charge of the content.
Yes.
But I think for me the biggest breach was in terms of what you might call the media house's own editorial guidelines in terms of professionalism. You simply, as a show host, do not have an interview subject whom you cannot control.
Absolutely. None. You must always be in control.
As Charles said, I think it is normal that you sit down first with your guest, set the ground rules, agree on the parameters. If you cannot agree on that, then don't even go with that show.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As simple as that.
All right, and we'll get into, when we come back from the break, to that interview that I had with DP. Actually, it's been a year now, and I think Macharia tweeted or wrote something on Facebook about it. Macharia, I thought we were friends. I don't know. I saw someone said you wrote something about it.
That is a lie.
It's all in peer review.
I flatly deny. That is fake news.
But we'll be looking at that in terms of, you know, holding the authority to account. I mean, there was that other one with the president where I'm accused of being arrogant and said I'm not in Japan. And whether that was any, you know, breach of professional conduct. We'll be getting to that, as well as that article from the Star on Sonko's HIV status. Was there ethical breach there? Stay with us.